Hi, all, Paul here again. We're talking about the PT455. Okay, the other two buttons are not necessarily accessible to everybody, but they're necessary when you're setting the instrument up. Configuration allows access to all of the important parameters of the instrument, either general communications, calculations, probe test. These are where you set up the different parameters for the impedance or burn-off, for example. Or memory mapping, which is how we assign registers to particular parameters in the instrument for SCADA systems. Typically these are mapped as a batch furnace, but they can be configured for PLCs, other types of SCADA packages as well, so it's very flexible. And then we have controllers and recipes in the configuration. So this is where the controllers are set up. In this particular application for a batch, I just have internal loops, and there's my temperature, carbon, and oil loops, and these are where I assign the inputs and outputs. Now you may decide in the commission of the system that you actually need an analog or possibly a digital output. That can be changed here with the control mode. In time proportioning, single or dual contacts are available, or I can do a direct current single, for example, and then what's available for my outputs are the analog channels that are available on the input-output card. So we're going to go back to gas. These are some of the PID values, but they're also available as individual PID segments. So it's possible to program the instrument with different PID levels depending on what range of the process you're operating in. For example, if you're coming up to temperature, you may have a different proportional band value than if you're operating at set point over a long period of time. So it's possible to make these changes and add more PID loops. Recipes is this is where you can create user alarms, and these are using the A opcode in the recipe language. A typical one would be end program or end cycle. That's where these are created, and once these are programmed into the instrument, they're available back in the recipe language when you're writing a recipe. Flags are available for particular functions such as probe burn-off, impedance test, verification, and these use the recipe flag command, and they are also used, recipe flag commands are also used to change the set point of a remote instrument, for example. So background programs are not necessary any longer because we've taken the ability to access individual slaves up to 32, which is the limit for 485, for example, and write those set points using the flag and Z opcode commands without the background program. Events can also be defined here, and the typical ones would be burn off, cycle done, and you can add or subtract any additional events that are required in the field. Maintenance is kind of a low-level screen here. This is where you can do the software updates if there's any changes to the operating system of the instrument or upgrades, as well as backup and restore. The backup and restore is done through the USB port here. We just plug in a stick, and if I select backup and restore and I want to back up this particular configuration, let's select configuration, resource, system config, and it copies the files over to the stick. This can then be used to replicate the same configuration on other instruments, for example, or just save this as a backup if you're putting a new instrument in as a replacement. The full backup and restore also copy in the complete operating files and configuration files for the instrument itself. Manual mode is helpful for maintenance purposes, and it gives you full control over the outputs of any of the particular loops. Obviously, this is something an advanced user would use, but we can change these control outputs for the loops, or we can also manually activate individual digital outputs. If we have a digital output that's configured as a safety, those are still going to function as safeties, because right now I'm in a fault mode for my temperature interlocks, and it's going to maintain that as long as that condition exists. So that's a tour of the PT455 graphic interface. It's very intuitive, easy to use, and hopefully it's going to be useful for the management of the instrument as well as the operation of the instrument. Thank you.